of that. So it's, you have to buy the module, and I forget now what we paid for the year. It was $1,000 or $1,500.
Just a side note, we're building modules off of a student database. We've now decided upon one singular company that we're working with, and everything builds off the database. You're going to be seeing next fall, we're going to be rolling out online payments for school lunch, working off of the student database. Edline works off the student database. All of our reporting that we do with the Department of Education, which is substantial, works off of the student database. The elementary report card system, while it's not online yet, works off of this database. Attendance reporting. So we're really, with fairly scant technology resources, I think we're doing a pretty good job capitalizing upon the accuracy of the database. And Edline is the best example. I'm sure the middle school is interested, and I think the thinking here was, correct me if I'm wrong, John, that when you worked with Pam on this, the thinking was, let's try it at the high school.
As the pilot.
As the pilot.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
The lunchroom program, is that some kind of debit card that you're going to be handing out with the?
Yes, in brief, we'll have a lot more discussion about it later, but in brief, we now have a point-of-sale system whereby all lunches are tracked through a terminal as a student exits the lunch line, and it says what the bill is based on what they've bought. So what we're hoping to roll out this fall in stages is 2 new services for parents. First, they'll be able to look up what their student has been purchasing for the year, so they can track the content of how their money's being spent, but also will allow them to use a check, debit card, or credit card to put money on account.
That's great.
Great. Okay, John. Sorry for the segue there.
No, I think it's great. I'm happy to talk about it, and I'd love to come back in the fall and just update you all on. Just maybe remind me to do that.
Okay.
I think the next changes I included here are proposing on page 13, just a short statement about report cards and also our academic support class. There's a couple of gaps that we're missing. On page 15, and going on to page 16, you may or may not remember that last year I had come to you with a substantial number of changes in the area of guidance and about records and information being released to colleges and universities, things that our guidance counselors had gathered from workshops that they go to as part of their regional cohort. This is this release of directory information is one additional item that they asked me to include, and it's basically about, it specifies under the law what information may be shared about a student and what information may not be shared. So they asked for me to include the specificity of that.
In reading this, it's an opt-out system.
Correct.
You tell them, you tell the parents and the student, we are releasing this information.
Right.
And then they have an opportunity to come back and say, no, we don't want you to release it. Correct?
That's right, and that's how we do it with the military recruiting request. I make that known to parents that if they don't want their child's information released, it's very similar to that same system.
John, I have one question about this. Is there, if somebody does want to opt out, is there a time frame they need to do it, or can they do it at any time?
They could notify us of that at any time, but we wouldn't be able to. We might not be able to do what they had already. We might have already released information, but from the time that they notify us going forward, we would not.
Okay, because I know, I'm a doctoral student, so one of the requirements is that you do this at the beginning of every semester, in this case quarter. So when that information is actually released, I think it would be nice to amend this that says how often this happens, so the parents know when this information generally goes out, so they're not writing a furious request saying, don't send my stuff out and there's an accident, you know what I mean? So
yes.
We get a notice about the frequency when I'm in school, so I think it would be helpful.
Okay.
It does say that the school has to give public notice of the types of information it may release and allow eligible students and parents a reasonable time after such notice to request this information may not be released without the prior consent of the student or parent.
And we believe the language in the handbook is giving the public notice.
But so that, I was just
That-
going to ask
that's what I was
that.
gonna-
You
yeah.
don't send out a notice every time saying.
No, we never have. The only one we do is on a military recruiter request for.
Right, you send a separate form.
That's new one. Yes, I send a separate form out, right.
Is this something you could just do at the beginning of the year and get it done? Because that's usually, when
Could
Sure.
you have a separate form that says we will be releasing this type of information?
Yeah, I
If for
could.
any reason you don't want it
You
to be
get it done
released?
once.
Yeah, do it once and then.
That's not a problem, I could do that with the
Okay.
fall packet.
I
Yeah.
think that makes sense, just to make it a little more public.
Then you don't have to change this, but it would just be a.
So send notice and just request if they want to opt out that they do it by such and such date,
Right.
type
It's
of
just
thing?
a suggestion.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then you can keep this the same, keep this
Yeah.
as is in here.
So that would be separate, but the language here would remain the same.
Perhaps you could include that in the same
Oh, with the,
thing,
military
where you're
thing.
telling them about the changes that are in the handbook.
Yes.
Right,
And highlight that as an item.
Probably for this year. Next year would not be something new, so we would have to come up with.
Right,
Right.
with a form,
Yeah, I
right.
think so.
yeah.
No,
But
that's-
even
that's-
making that a repetitive thing, even though it wasn't new,
Yeah,
Right.
just highlight it so that it would
sure, I can do that.
ring that
Yeah,
bell.
Yep.
no, I think so. Yeah, because it's an issue, I mean, there's some privacy issues potentially with people, so. No, I could do that. On page 16 and going over to 17, just those couple of lines about the role of the guidance counselor in the college search and application process. A member of the school council suggested it might be nice to have a statement in there about the guidance counselor's role. Again, just something that was missing, nothing to be refined. Then I think we go ahead a little bit to page 20. I just added a statement in about the bus permits and that they are required and that there is a process for obtaining that through the business office at the middle school. Okay. You'll see some blanks throughout on names for people.
Yeah, I was gonna ask what, I think after tonight, we hopefully will have a, special education pupil personnel services director, if we approve that, so you'll have
Right,
that
once
name.
I have the information on that, and if there's a replacement hire for Pam Bowden, I would,
Right.
I'll insert those names. When,
Okay.
I probably won't go to the printer for a month on
Okay,
this,
so
so there'll be
alright.
some time.
Okay.
But if you see those 10 or 12 asterisks in a row, that was more a note to me that I needed to add somebody's name in there at some
Alright.
point. We go ahead to page 29. All right, now I'm getting into some, the prohibition of smoking. Our practice has always been that a student found in possession or using tobacco products receives a 3-day external suspension. That's been in existence, it was in existence when I came in 2003. I'm just suggesting that we state that here, and it's also stated somewhere else later in the book.
That's the policy, might as well.
That's been the practice, I just think it helps to, I mean, I added in, I think, last year, maybe the year before, we didn't have a statement in about chewing tobacco. We happened to have had an incident last year, I think it was. So I added that in, so it's just to restate further, so that there's not any confusion as to the severity of the penalty, I guess, for that.
Yep.
And then if we go to page 35, this is where I added it again under the suspendable offenses. And I'm also recommending to the committee that our minimum external suspension from school for any student found to be in possession or under the influence of alcohol at school property or on school property or a school-sponsored event increase from a minimum 3 days external suspension to 6. And along with that, that's item 21. Items 21 and 22 were in the previous handbooks written as one item. I broke them out into 2. And again, it has been our policy on those few and unfortunate occasions when there may have been a drug violation, that there was a minimum 10-day external suspension from school, and that's actually consistent with law and following through with the potential for an expulsion. So I just thought it would be important to note that the risks are high and the penalties are severe for students who violate the school's drug and alcohol policies.
The one thing on 22, do you need to add into their possession and/or the use of drugs at school, on school property, or at school-sponsored activity? Because you don't have that in
I
there.
could, I'm not, yeah, that's,
Just add that in there.
it's not necessarily that only though, because there is the school zone, which may not be on
Oh,
school
that's right.
property, so,
It's like within 300 feet of the school.
and it could also be,
something
a
like that?
student could,
1,000 feet?
and a student also, there could be a violation out in the community that could have the potential to impact the school, that where it may not be, a felony charge, for example, or a charge
Okay.
of distribution.
So maybe,
So
okay, Yeah,
I think it might be better not to include
Yeah,
that
I agree with you.
for that one.
Okay,
That's fine.
yeah.
Okay, so that's that one.
Oh, you got through that one pretty easily.
Page 37, just a little bit. I'm so sorry Jerry's not here to hear this. And I
Well, I'm
wanted to.
gonna fill in, I'm playing the role of
Okay,
Jerry.
that's all
tonight.
right, that's
It's
okay.
Webster.
It's always good-natured. I just added a little bit of language in the attendance policy on, really for parents, just on the kinds of things that do constitute an excused absence and those that don't. And also just reminding folks that if you call a child in to be absent from the school, we still are tardy, we still would like the paper note to come in the next day to ultimately excuse it in the computer. And then I just cleaned up the language a little bit for serious illness. I don't, to be honest with you, I don't even remember what it used to read. I'm sorry, I just don't remember now. The item F, I thought, opened up a little bit for some discretion, because we do occasionally get reasons that may not be, letters A through E. So I thought that the administration needed a little discretion to determine if something was severe enough to be excused, so to speak.
One question at the top of the
Yeah.
page there. The part that discusses students who are absent from school may not participate in or attend any co-curricular activity or event that day, except in the case of extenuating circumstances determined by a school administrator. I think that's fine. However, that's somewhat inconsistent with a couple other places in the book where it says that if a student is absent on the day before a weekend event, they cannot participate.
Does it not say except in the case of an extenuating circumstance?
No, what I'm saying is here we don't talk about the weekend. So in other words, this just says,
I think that goes under, that's in the athletics piece, though, what you just said.
Right.
That's a separate, there are separate rules that govern attendance for athletics.
No.
That's why it's
So
later in the,
not here.
But
it's later in the book.
okay, well, I'll wait till we get there, and Jerry will wait till we get
This
there.
is just, I guess the difference here is this is just general attendance rules.
Okay.
There are separate
Okay,
rules
all
for
right.
participation in athletics, and
We're waiting for you.
Yeah.
okay, what's that?
We're waiting for you.
Okay, all right.
Page 42.
So page 38, I delineated some reasons that do not constitute an extenuating circumstance for tardiness, similar to what we just talked about with the absences.
That's fine.
Page 43,
No, 41 actually, the bottom
Oh,
of 41.
I'm sorry. Oh, you know what? I don't
Top
have
of 42.
I don't have a 41.
It
What is
says,
it?
it's about fundraising activities, and you just added in that they
Oh.
have to get the form from the high school principal.
That previously said that the form had to come from the superintendent's office, and that it had to be turned in by September 30th.
Okay.
I don't know why those pages are missing in mine, but I do remember it. And I took the liberty of changing that. It made sense. It didn't make sense that a high school teacher needed to get the form from the superintendent's office to then have the principal sign.
And also about September 30th. There might be
And
events
September
that-
30th, absolutely, there are spring
later,
sports do
right,
fundraising
exactly.
in March. I mean, that's why
Right.
I changed that. I think I wrote,
You just said to.
early as
advance
possible.
notice as
Yeah,
part.
yeah, exactly. So that was the logic behind that, okay? We, to be honest with you, that's what we've been doing. We have the forms in my office, and we were giving them out to people when they wanted to do a fundraiser.
And then 42 is where, Mr. Bowers just referred to the rules for participating in extracurricular activities. And that's where it says that the weekend or holiday activities are out if they're not at school on the day prior to that activity. And I know if he were here tonight, Mr. Venezia would be saying the same thing. I just continue to have a problem with that policy. I don't understand it. Is it an MIA policy that we're just following, or, because I don't understand if a kid is sick on Friday, legitimately sick, and then they feel better on Saturday or Sunday when an event is, and they can't participate. I don't understand it. I mean, I understand the policy. I don't understand the reasoning behind it.
Well, I guess what comes into question is, what determines legitimate sickness and illegitimate sickness, and does it open the door for, well, but I was sick, but I really wasn't sick, and then that, if a student's out of school anyway, they're going to miss that practice on Friday. The coach isn't going to allow them to play in the game Saturday, just by virtue of missing
Actually, I
the
think
practice.
I think that's right, based on my experience.
Yeah,
with
it is.
most of
So
the
it takes it out anyway, but I do think it's more for the idea that you can't just be out for the day. I mean, if there's a legitimate reason for it, and there is that extenuating
We do have
circumstance.
the extenuated
Yeah.